Okay, we are on Camelback Road, north of Phoenix, north of downtown Phoenix. This is Camelback Road, and that is the namesake. That's Camelback Mountain there. It's been a busy season this year for Camelback Mountain. Usually you get a few calls, police calls about snowbirds who try to climb Camelback Mountain and then, get stuck up there or get lost up there. But this year it's been extraordinarily busy with fire department and rescue up there in the mountain. This is probably the biggest landmark here in Phoenix, Camelback Mountain. I wanted to do this blog at CAS, at the co-ed homeless shelter downtown, but I was kind of stopped by the guards there at the prison or shelter, and they just wouldn't let me shoot it there. So I'm gonna shoot it here at Camelback Mountain. I think it's a fitting icon for the homeless and the homeless population here in Phoenix, and actually around the country, because one I experienced here like 3 years ago when I first became homeless here in Phoenix, having lost my apartment here. I learned about different types of people who go to a homeless shelter. A homeless shelter doesn't mean that the people there are homeless by any means or any stretch of the imagination. But what I found out in my time there, when I first became homeless, and what would later really turn me off from homeless shelters when I went to them around the country, was just this whole masquerade of homelessness that seems to have pervaded the country and just really made, for many people, it's a mockery of the homeless, But it all seems to center around the homeless shelter and the people that congregate there or go there, or there are many kinds of people that go to the homeless shelter, that stay in the homeless shelter, and we get services at the homeless shelter. Now, some people that go there will go there for services, and they'll go there for lunch, or they'll go there for something, a breakfast or some meal maybe. And a lot of these people I'll call concerned citizens. They don't live at the shelter, they don't hang out at the shelter, they don't congregate at the shelter. They simply go there out of a concerned citizen kind of a mode. And if they meet somebody, if somebody, meets them, who knows what can happen. Okay? The other type of person at the homeless shelter is more likely maybe to stay at the shelter. Now, these can be oftentimes homeless people. They can be truly homeless people. Now, what I find really interesting about these residents of the homeless shelter is that they don't stay very long. They will be at the homeless shelter for a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, and then they're gone. And then they leave, and you never ever see them again. Another kind of person that stays at the shelter, I call young men, and I don't know if women do this or not, but certainly I know the boys in the neighborhood do it. They're like neighborhood boys, and young men, 20 years old, 25 years old, and it seems their occupation in life is not an occupation. Their occupation seems to be just to take up bunk space in the men's homeless shelter, to hang around the homeless shelter, to play homeless for whatever reason, you know. These guys, I mean, they're not homeless. Many of them, most of them live in the neighborhood, or they live in one of the suburbs around the city or something. Why they do what they do, only God knows. But they can be very, very obnoxious, and they can be very, very, you know, it's like, I can't understand why they just don't get a job and get on with their lives, but for some reason they feel they have to play the part of the homeless, you know, young man and stuff. And it gets very old, you know, when, you know, you realize these guys aren't homeless at all, you know, that it's just, it's a game to them, it's a joke to them, it's a mockery to them, and, you know. So that's a third kind of homeless person at the homeless shelter, and who stay there, and who will eat there, and who will get the services there, but are by no means homeless. And they're neighborhood boys, you know. So that's mainly the main types. Maybe the last type might be called the one who is not homeless, but is kind of into homeless culture. I mean, this kind of guy or woman, like, digs homelessness, you know? I don't know. It's like maybe one time they were homeless and they got such a thrill and kick out of it that they, you know, they'll be down at the shelter on certain days when the food will be good, or, you know, events will be on or something like that. They kind of, they're into homeless culture as the only way of explaining it that I can think of, you know. These guys tend to be older than the young men. They tend to be in their 30s and 40s, if not 50s. And, you know, they probably live in a boarding house or a rooming house somewhere, and, you know, they're just into homeless culture. And it's like, I don't know if they do it for the ego or the thrill, or they just like playing around in the mud and the muck of despair and poverty. But, you know, there is like a category of homeless people that just get off doing this. And they tend to be older than the boys who will sleep in the shelter and, you know, act poor and impoverished and stuff, only to go home later in the day, you know, and you know, clean up and watch, you know, binge watch Game of Thrones or something. So, you know, that's the homeless shelter. And that seems to be the makeup that I found here 3 years ago in Phoenix when I first went to the shelter, the Cass shelter here. And it's the categories I found throughout the country here. In every shelter I went to and stayed at or tried to stay at, all those categories existed, you know. So you can't tell one without the other without a scorecard, and, you know, so, I mean, it's troubling, and it's craziness. And, you know, it's long been said, I don't know who said it, but, you know, they said there's a lot of crazy people on the street, you know. And it's like, yeah. And I've long replied to that, yeah. If you're not crazy going onto the street, you'll be crazy by the time you get off it, you know. So, Camelback Mountain, here in 110-degree heat, Phoenix, Arizona.